Welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Richard Greenberg, president of the local chapter for ISSA here in Los Angeles, a little town by the ocean. And we're really happy that you could join us today. We have a number of people that signed up. Should be a good meeting. A little bit about ISSA. I'm not sure if you guys are aware that we are the founding chapter of ISSA International. Happened 30 plus years ago here in Los Angeles. And our goal is to promote management practices that will ensure the availability, integrity, and confidentiality of information. Big shout out to my fellow board of directors who work hard to bring you these meetings, bring you the annual summit, which will be in September, and trainings. We're glad that you can join us for those. And again, a big thank you to my fellow board members. Feel free to join our community. Go to our website, ISSA-LA.org, and you'll see an upper right, a place where you can sign up to get emails. We don't send very many out. This way you can stay abreast of when our meetings are and trainings and things of that nature. So please avail yourself of that. That'll keep you linked with us. Speaking of being linked with us, we were on social media. You can connect with us. We have discussions. We try to post relevant information, and we encourage discussions on our postings. So please join us, and let's share our ideas and our experiences, help each other out. That's what it's all about, particularly when we can't see each other yet in person. Social media becomes even more important right now, doesn't it? We have some meetings coming up. Next month, we'll have Jeff Tutton and Bill Corbett. They'll be talking about modern digital forensics and incident response. Then in April, we are planning our first in-person meeting, and let's hope that the Super Bowl spike in cases doesn't derail that. But we're having Steve Hunt fly out, so we better be meeting in person. Steve has spoken at a summit in the past for us. He's a great speaker. He'll be talking about how to get buy-in for budgets, projects, and big ideas. May 18th, we're working on a speaker. We think we might have one lined up, so stay tuned for that. And June 15th, Ulf Mattson is coming out to speak. He's actually written a book on privacy, and his talk will be about controlling privacy and the use of data assets. Who owns the new oil? Very important topic that doesn't get enough airplay, but we'll hear about that from Ulf. That also will be in person as we move forward. We have evening meetings most of the time, but we throw in some lunch meetings also. So stay tuned and stay abreast of when and where our meetings will be. As I mentioned, the summit has been delayed till September just to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the environment and can come back to the beach with us. Those of you who were lucky enough to come in May of 2019 to the Annenberg Beach House had an amazing experience because it's literally right on the sand, on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. So you can stay in your office or you can come to the beach with us. We've got a great team. If you want to help join the planning committee, please email us at admin@issa-la.org. You'll get free CPE credits. You'll be part of an awesome team. You get to interact with all these leaders in the field because we have speakers flying out from all over the country, sometimes the world. And of course, you'll get into the summit for free, and we'll even let you bring somebody with you. So join our team. If you can't, we mark this on your calendars so you'll make sure that you'll be able to attend as well. Today's presentation, our speaker requested that it would be as interactive as possible. So he wants you to ask questions. So we're using, as we do every meeting actually, an app called Slido. And if you go to app.sli.do, and then you just enter the code where there's a spot for it, ISSA-LA, and you can ask questions, and you can do it anonymously or you can put your name in. And as he speaks, he'll be addressing them. So that's pretty cool for all of us. So feel free to use that. And I've spoken on what I want to speak about. So now it's time to introduce Abe Chen. And this is a special Valentine's edition. So we've got the VP of Security at Tinder for all of you to hear what he's got to say about the relationships that make a security career. And like most seasoned vets in the security space who've reached a high level, he's got a lot of stories he can tell about that. So Abe, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn everything over to you. If you have anything you'd like to present, just share the screen and I'll step back and let you take over. And thanks again. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Let's see. Hopefully this comes up. Let me go to the full screen mode. So again, as Richard mentioned, feel free to ask questions anytime. I'm excited to be here. It's been a while, unfortunately, since I've been in an ISSA meeting. Apologize for that. It's I think I started my career 20 plus years ago, and actually Mark Smith on this call today was my first manager when I graduated from my undergrad degree. And so it's quite an honor for me to have this opportunity to share how my career has progressed and what has led me to where I am today. And so again, feel free to go on Slido, ask us many questions. I love to interact. Unfortunately, we are not doing this in person. So this is the best that we can do with from that perspective. Okay. So the relationships that make a security career, I've wanted to talk about this for some time now. And maybe I'll start with a little bit about myself. And as we progress through this presentation, I will share a lot of lessons I learned in my career, some war stories, more focus on relationships. And why relationships? Why not some new hot technology or a discussion about the latest hack? Is because when I really reflect on my career, I realized that what really made a strong security program or a strong security or a good security at a company was really the people. Right? It was not necessarily the technology. Yes, technology contributed to it. It was not the processes or the documents or the certifications or maybe we're ISO certified or we met some NIST requirement. That was not what made the program effective. It was really a combination of the people, what they brought, what they know, how we interacted with each other, and how the organization, what made the organization grew. Okay, so love to, if you also, another thing I forgot to mention is if you want to chime in on Slido as to where you are in your career, if it's security, something new for you, if you are a manager in security, if you've been doing this for 20, 30 plus years, I'd love to hear that so I can kind of tune this chat or this talk, treat them as chats and customize it for you. Okay. I am the VP of Security at Tinder, and a little bit about the Tinder security program. We are split up into multiple domains. And the way that I like to build my programs is I like to have a group that's focused on product security and another group that's focused on corporate enterprise security. And within those groups, I have different groups, teams or pods focused on, let us be governance, risk and compliance, red teaming or pen testers, right? The red teamers, application security, infrastructure security, and other different areas. I also teach at UC Santa Cruz Extension. I think possibly I'll be teaching again this summer. Been doing this for 10 plus years and it's a lot of fun. If you want to see your career grow in security, teaching is a great way of doing so. It's a great way to give back and also stay apace. And I'll talk a little bit about why I started teaching and when I started teaching in my career, what drove me to teaching and why I love teaching so much. Okay. I have had a lot of certification. I said I have had because it got really expensive. I couldn't maintain all my certifications. So I could let a lot of them wane, but I think I still have, as of today, my CSSP. I've had my CSP for a very long time. And it's one of the certs that really helped me advance or start my career, transitioning from an IT focused career into security. It's also one of the certifications that, as I've grown in my career, the value has diminished over time, in the sense that not necessarily that it's not a great certification, because I think it's a very important certification, but it's not something that, certs are not something that, as your career progresses, you will continue to pursue as much. 20 plus years building security programs, I say around the globe. I've worked for companies that, I've worked for Chinese companies. Like, not many of us can say that, right? After protecting my companies from China, honestly, for a very long time, I went to go work for a Chinese car company. And that was actually an interesting experience I can also talk about as well. And I learned a lot there. Security is done differently in a Chinese company. And then and currently I'm in Tinder, and I'll talk a little bit later about how my career kind of progressed and why I made certain career decisions to kind of help you along in your career as well. Okay. So I'm going to pause there, go to the questions really quick. So the first question was, what advice or pearls of wisdom could you offer to each life stage student pursuing cybersecurity, middle school, high school, and college? Okay. My career in security really started before I started working. I was always very interested in security research, and how I initially started, I would say, was dating myself, but back in the 80s, my 80s is a very long time ago now for some of us, or some of you, or many of you may not even been born yet. I was lucky in that my dad had a friend that built computers and sold computers. And my uncle, my dad's brother, was also in that same field where they were building computers. And my parents worked, right? Both of them worked. And I was one of those latchkey kids who came home and unlocked the door myself. And oftentimes my dad would drop me off at his friend's house or his friend's workplace. And he would have me work on the computers, right? I was very young back then, but he would have me put in the memories. He would show me how to go into BASIC. He gave me my first computer, which is a Atari 400. I'm sure you can probably look that up. They actually have one in the computer museum up here in the Bay Area, which is really sad because that really tells you how old I am. But so I was lucky in that I started learning fairly early. Okay. What is wonderful today is that there is something called YouTube. And so you can learn a lot, even at a middle school level or in high school, about security. And a great place to learn about security is, of course, learning how to tinker and do security research. Security research, I think, is a great avenue for those that are starting early in their career. And so I highly advise, if you're interested in security, even at the middle school level, jump on one of those YouTube channels that teach security, right? There's a lot of Wi-Fi security courses online that you can learn about security. I don't, of course, advise that you test or try some of these things on people's networks, but that's kind of how I started prior to YouTube's existence. For us, the YouTube for my days was BBSs, right? We dialed into them, okay, and so forth. I'll talk a little bit more about this later as well, okay? When hiring students, do you see any value in those who are heavily involved in cybersecurity clubs? Yes, actually I do. CTFs are awesome. I was just talking to my team the other day. We're actually hiring interns right now. The unfortunate part about hiring interns is that we only have 2 available positions for interns this year. The other unfortunate part about hiring interns is that we already have over 300 applicants, right? And so now the team has to sit down, and unfortunately we can only pick 2 out of those wonderful 300. And so what kind of sticks out is that participation as when you're a student in CTFs, in cybersecurity clubs, right? We tend to lean or give priority to those. Those tend to rise up in the stack. Okay, so definitely, I think participating in those before in high school, in middle school, in some cases, I've seen some programs for middle schoolers. There's DEF CON for kids, right? Maybe participate in DEF CON for kids since you're in primary school or something like that. Like those things are great opportunities, and they do kind of stick out when we're looking through resumes. Okay, so entry-level positions, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I know that we only have an hour, and I talk a lot, so I will try to keep my slides short. I will not try to bore you and put you to sleep with slides. The more questions you ask, the more I will try to respond to. Do you experience? Okay, so yeah, that's kind of hard to say. So I think I would say this short answer is that there are a lot of things I deal with, and we could focus back and we'll cover some of these other questions as well. Okay. Final semester at Cal Poly. Okay, we talked about that a little bit. Okay, so on to the next slide. Building relationships. Again, relationships really drive a security organization. And this is where I myself am a introvert. I actually I'm not a big fan of doing talks. I like to teach because I like to give back, right? If I'm working at a company and the company asks me to stand up in front of a crowd and talk, wave my arm around, I will do that. Opportunities to talk like this, I don't do too many, right? And so for me, it's building relationship does not always come natural. My happiest state is sitting in my room, doing something on the computer, in some corner, door closed, lights off, right? That's my happiest state. Okay. And so I had to learn how to build relationships, and I learned because I had to, right? In security, one of the things that's very important in security is that we have to convince people to do things that they don't want to do, frankly, right? Most of the time when you go to a engineer or a coworker and you ask them to change the pattern of how they manage something on their computer, right? They don't necessarily understand why. And I think as security professionals, sometimes it's hard for us to explain, right? Like we just, for the answer that oftentimes we give is it's a policy. So can you just do that? And of course, if you don't deal with engineers on a regular basis, or you work with engineers and developers, you'll realize that they have, like yourself, they have inquisitive minds, and you need to explain why. And it's hard to explain why if you don't really understand why. And if it's a policy and you don't understand what's behind the policy, you won't be able to explain why you want an engineer to follow that policy. And so they might not they just won't comply. And so why I say start with empathy when you're building relationships is that to be better capable of asking, and this might not just apply, does not just apply to your career in security, but also how do you get someone to convince someone to do what you perceive as the correct or right course of action or the right thing to do, is you have to understand where they're coming from. And so that's why I always say start with empathy, right? When building a security program, what's most important to me is to build those empathetic relationships. Try to understand what is important to the engineer, right? What is important to management? What is important to the goals of the company? Example I'll give is when I was working at a company, right? I won't say specifically which company, you might be able to figure out after I talk about this a little bit. The company was in very dire shape in the sense that we had ran out, we were out of money, okay? And if the product did not ship on time, the doors would have been closed, okay? And so when the product shipped, and this is, I'm being very generic about this because this happens at every company that builds products to some degree. When the product ships, you are oftentimes forced to ship a product that from a security perspective is not perfect, right? But what you have to realize is you have to put yourself in the shoe of the company in this case, or the management of the company, in that if the product does not ship, you don't have anything to secure, right? And so that's a little bit more of the extreme situation, but the key is that you have to put yourself in that shoe to understand, right? Someone else's shoe to understand what their perspective is before you can make decisions on how to and when do you apply security. Okay. Going back to the questions, what do you feel there is a big need for in the field? Constantly hear application sec or cloud sec engineers are very in demand. Do you agree with that? Okay. I think right now what's hot and has been hot for a while is cloud sec. Okay. Cloud security is, and it's because companies, if they have not already, are transitioning to the cloud. And what has happened is, and this is a great question because it's, I'm going off topic again, but I'll try to answer these as questions that come up. What's happening is that so security engineers today are working in their current job. And when you're working in a place for a period of time, the technology that you're working with might not necessarily change as quickly as, let's say, whatever is the hottest thing in the market. And so to compensate for that, you might hire someone, you might go out, let's say you become a manager or you're hiring someone to work for you. You will go out and look for skill sets to complement your capabilities. And that's part of building a team. Right? And so for those companies, which there are many today, that skill set that's missing is cloud sec, right? Your security team today has to keep doing what they are experts in, because those problem areas will not disappear. They still exist. You still have infrastructure, you still have computers, you still have policies. Someone still needs to meet the legal compliance requirements. That's not going to change. You still need your GRC team, but now your company is transitioning to the cloud, right? To moving to whichever cloud product. So there's this gap in skill set. Hence why today cloud sec is very important. AppSec is important because I think AppSec comes in many forms, and a lot of times when we talk about AppSec, we don't necessarily know what AppSec means. Like AppSec is a very broad field. I can see one day we'll hear, instead of it being called AppSec, it'll be called, it'll be like 3 different or 4 different specialties, like device security expert or API security expert. Like companies eventually will probably start hiring API security experts. So it's just, what it is that software things have moved more into the software space. Companies are building more tools, internal tools or external tools. And so when you buy a product from a vendor, you might be integrating it with another vendor, requiring you to write some code. And so that's why AppSec and CloudSec is becoming more important. Hopefully that kind of answers that question for you. Okay, so back to the slides. Since that culture, okay, so a little bit about culture, and why I want to talk about culture is that how you apply a security program is really depending on the culture of your company. Okay, and culture comes, like how much you can push depends on the culture of the company. One of the things I talk about often is this concept of a cultural shift, right? And I used to believe very firmly that my job was to create this cultural shift so that security is part of the company's culture, so that there's this concept of security by design. And what I realized as I progressed my career is that security by design, or culture, I mean, going back to culture, what the security program does not mold the culture. The security program has to learn what the cultural threshold is. Like, how far can you push security in a culture? And not all companies, like, culture changes over time. You can't necessarily accelerate it. And so where a company's culture's maturity around security determines how secure that company can become, right? There are companies out there who have been compromised many, many times. And every time they're compromised, their security program matures because the culture realizes that there's a need. And for some companies, it takes many compromises before their understanding of security, because security becomes part of the culture. For other companies, it might take very few. It might take one, might take none. Okay. Some companies just start with a security culture. And so the point I'm trying to drive here is that the culture will guide your security program. Don't try to shift the culture, okay? Because the culture is much, much bigger, more than your security program or your security department. Okay, another question. What are some things that you would do differently when you were first getting to the security space? What are some common mistakes that you see now? And I'm actually going to go back to this one in the next slide, where I talk a little bit about how my career progressed. And so one of the bullet points I bring up is what would I have done differently? So I'll come back to this one shortly. Okay. Know your partners. So what is the point really talking about is that if you want to push security forward in a company, you have to know who are your partners. Okay. A good example, a resource that oftentimes security experts or security teams don't realize is that if you work at, let's say, if you're lucky to work at a SaaS organization, right, software as a service organization, or PaaS, or any of the AAS type organizations, or anytime where you are in a business to business scenario where you're providing a service to another company, the sales department oftentimes is your best partner. Okay, and so why I say that is because if you can convince the sales department, well, oftentimes oftentimes the sales department, especially at SaaS, will engage a customer, and the customer will come to them with a vendor security review document of some sort, right? Asking them to fill out this sometimes very long document, sometimes very short document. And there's a lot of requirements in there. And if the salesperson is the only one filling out that questionnaire, the salesperson is probably going to write yes for everything, right? And which of course is not what you want. It's working with sales is a great opportunity because sales wants to make the sales, they're going to want those checkboxes to become yes if they're not yes already. And so there's been countless number of times where I worked with my sales team to justify expenditures, justify headcount, justify growing the security department to meet the customer's requirements. So that's why know your partners is very important, right? Our typical partners in security would be the legal department, audit departments, HR. Those are our typical partners. And sometimes engineering is our partners as well. So just know who your partners could be. Building networks. For sake of time, I will try to keep this one short, but networks, opportunities like ISSA, networks, people in the field. Networks could even be a vendor, right? I can say that there are vendors that I've worked with for many years that I haven't bought anything from them for 10, 15 years, right? That are part of my network. There are people that I work with. There are vendors that I've, salespeople that I've interacted with on some project 15 years ago, have not bought anything from them ever since then, but they are in my network. When I want to know what's the latest technologies out there, I'll ask them like, hey, what are you seeing out there? Because oftentimes those salespeople, interesting about salespeople move around probably as much as security people do. So, and this is the other part that I'm alluding to, is that security people, we move around quite a bit. And I can say that in my 20 years, I might have been in 20 jobs. Okay, I stopped counting at some point in time. And some people might think it's kind of strange, but I think in many ways that I probably could not have learned so much or grew so much if I had stayed in one place the whole time. Okay. What do you think about the future of confidential computing? Well, it depends on how you define confidential computing, but I don't think there is, how I treat computing is that if you put something, because everything is moving to the cloud, and if you put something on some digital object, someone can access it. Okay. Maybe they don't access it today, but let's say at some point in time, your computer at home, you might throw it away, right? And if someone really wanted to access that data, they're going to access the data. Users today are very open about what they share. And if I can tell you that, like, I've done a lot of investigations, right, at all the companies I worked at. And there is not like one person that I have not been able to find, right? It's, if you spend enough time looking for someone, like, I don't know if this kind of is what you're alluding to, but, or kind of covers that. I think there's a perception of confidentiality and privacy on the internet, but that doesn't really, I can find you if I really wanted to, right? It sounds a little scary, but like, you will, whenever someone does something, even if they are anomalous, right, there is a breadcrumb somewhere. And if I, working for some random company, right, can find you, governments can find you. So it's not, right? So yeah, so that's one of the points I like bring up. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but let me know if it doesn't, or maybe there's a different definition of confidential computing. And then the other side, we want to talk about like encryption and all that kind of stuff, right? So I talk in one of the classes I teach about a little bit, not an expert, about post-quantum computing and what the threats against are crypto algorithms. And so I think if there is something out there that we're using that is very common, right? It's probably been cracked, or there's probably some, I'm very skeptical. I just figure there's probably some backdoor or some way, right? Give you an example is that there are products that are designed to help us have secure communication on our devices, right? If that product works in a country that is authoritative and monitors their users, and that product works in that country, it's probably because they could read whatever that's happening on that product. And I've seen so many of these products. There's only one product that I know that I've really felt comfortable with in the past, and it's not even offered anymore because someone probably eventually cracked it. Where I took it to China, and every time I use that app, my phone stopped working for like 20 minutes, right? Like I wouldn't be able to get on the internet for 20 minutes. And so that told me that product actually worked versus other like products that we use frequently today seem to work in China, which tells me that it probably doesn't work, right? Okay. Well, lots of questions. So, okay, what careers in cybersecurity do you recommend besides engineering or developer roles? Well, there are, I definitely, it depends on what you like to do, right? This is like, it depends. There are so many career avenues in cybersecurity. If you like to talk with people and you like to write, you like to build relationships, the GRC space, governance risk and compliance, is a great place to be, right? Because you get to talk to all the different business units, you get to learn how the business runs, right? And you get to interpret security and how it applies to the department, right? There are also roles in, IT is a great place to learn about security, right? I started my professional career in IT, working in LA for Mark Smith, who's on this call, right? And so it was a great place because like it gave me the foundations to understand what I needed to protect the network, right? Understanding how the network works, right? How hubs, we had hubs back then. Probably need to look up what a hub is, right? No one talks about hubs anymore. Hubs and switches and routers and phone systems and not just, Windows or computing or desktops, all that kind of stuff. I don't think I would have had that foundation and would not have been as successful in security today if I had not started my career in IT. And of course, I'm not saying that's the only avenue, but I was a help desk desktop specialist, right? And I transitioned into security, but those skill sets I learned helping people with their computers, being empathetic, right? I think my empathetic approach to security started there, right? So I think there's other roles. You don't have to be engineering. You don't have to be a developer. It depends on your skill set. There are so many facets of security. I could talk for hours about it. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time. Okay. Do you take effort to vet for only those who are the best for your professional interests? If so, what are some of the red flags, green flags I look for? So I assume that this has to do with vetting of people. Do you take effort to vet? Vetting of people. So what are red flags and green flags I look for? A red flag is when someone says, I know how to do a lot of things, right? I think that's the red flag for me, is when someone says, oh, I know how to do that. A red flag is also when the resume is looks like that person, especially if someone later in their career lists a lot of classes that they took, right? Like early in their career, that's a plus. Later in the career or middle of your career, that's not necessarily a good thing. Red flags for me would be, a red flag for me would be, let's say, okay, it's good that you brought this up, because one of the biggest red flag for me is when someone comes off as a bully. Okay, like I like to hire nice people. Okay, because the reason why security professionals get paid well is because our jobs are hard. Our jobs are very stressful. Okay, there have been days where I worked 3 days straight without sleeping. Okay, like I remember very clearly every time that I worked for days without sleeping. So I don't hire bullies because if I'm going to work 3 days straight without sleeping, I'm going to be in a bad mood, and it just doesn't work well when I'm worrying whether someone is how someone is treating other people on my team, right? So I think I like to hire nice people because I like being around nice people. I like to treat people nicely. I like to treat people the way I like to be treated, and others treat me the way that I treat them. So that for me, a red flag is if someone comes in a little bit, like there are certain questions I ask to understand that. Green flags, positives, right? I think someone that demonstrates empathy, demonstrates that they're collaborative. Those are some examples. Okay. Well, lots of questions. So if we don't get through all the slides, I think the questions are actually more important. So I'm going to try to go through those questions. Okay. In your opinion, what's the traditional role will be heavily influenced by security? Okay. Let me. That one I have a hard time understanding. So, to be honest, I will come back to that. How important is hands-on experience? Certification is a start, right? If I see someone that has a Security Plus exam, I say, okay, they got probably about somewhere between, 1 to 3 months of experience is probably what the equivalent for Security Plus. I'll take a look at that resume. I actually have the Security Plus. Right? I took it years ago. I don't even know if it's still valid. I don't know what, but I took the Security Plus years ago and passed it. But so like for me, certifications do tell me something. It's a baseline, right? If you pass the CISSP, but you haven't met the requirements to be a full-fledged CISSP, you pass them, you have, to me, maybe 3 to 6 months of experience that I will consider, and it's impressive. It's a hard exam, so you put in the time. It's a start, especially if your certifications early on in your career means more, right? Hands-on experience later on in your career means more. A certification is a great way to start and get in the door. Certifications are expensive, so you might not need to go that path, right? Certifications are very, studying, taking those classes, paying for the exam, they're very expensive. You might not need it, but they can help. Okay. Okay. How to build a culture and process of security within the company. Okay, we'll get to that if I get to my slides, and so I'll cover that. What your advice on having a good work-life balance? Okay, so my advice to having a good life balance is to just have a life. I didn't really learn what work-life balance meant until the pandemic, to be honest. Okay, I am a workaholic, and did that help me become more successful? It probably did to some degree. But what's more important is to learn to work smarter. I think I'm as productive as I am today now as I was before, but it took a lot of hard life lessons for me. Like, I could say that if you ever talk to someone that worked at like a Tesla or Elon Musk company, right? We all have the same war stories, right? Working 70 plus 90 hours a day, right? My life used to be, I would come home, be about 9 o'clock, family would be in bed, or right, my food would be in the microwave. I would heat up my food, I would eat my food, and I would, after I eat, might put the kids to sleep, and then I jump back on my computer around 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and then I work till maybe 2 a.m. and then rinse and repeat, right? And so that's not sustainable, right? Eventually, still suffer from PTSD. So talking about it makes me like cringe, right? And so I think you just have to have a life. Like, you just have to stop. Okay. That's life is short, right? And something that it took me a long time to learn. Your boss is going to be more impressed with you working smarter and finishing within regular work hours than if you work till 3 a.m. every day, right? It's just, I think you have to figure out what your maximum is and work within a reasonable time frame. Okay, I know that really answers it. Okay, so lots of things, lots of questions. I will keep going and then I'll come back to the questions. Okay. Career and security. Ooh, okay, I think I might answer a lot of this. So many domains. Where did I start? Again, I started in IT. From IT, so what my tactic to growing my career in security, I job hopped. Okay, and I went from company to company to company, and that was the fastest way for me to learn as much as I can about as many facets of security. I worked in lots of different verticals, from tech to education to auto to, like, I've been all over the place, and now I'm like in social media space working for a dating site, right? And I went to those places because they all had something that I was looking for. Okay, and so it used to be a little bit more unusual. Now it's a little bit more common. I think as the security profession progressed, going from a job like 1 to 2 years to the next job is not that unusual anymore in the security field. There would have been no way, there was no way that I can have the amount of security knowledge that I have today if I had stayed in one place. Okay. How my strategy was basically there, I needed a technology, understanding of technology. I worked in IT. I wanted to learn about networking, so I did networking. I wanted to learn about databases, so what I do, I took a job that did networking and databases. And then I knew that to understand security, that I needed to have an understanding of policies and procedures. So I transitioned over to working on at a SaaS vendor, handling a lot of the vendor security reviews, where they allowed me to learn about large companies and how they do security. From there, I went off to, really pursued what I was passionate about, which is like, I'm crazy about cars, right? Some of you that know me know that I like cars. And so working at a car company in Silicon Valley was very cool for me. And there I learned about hardware security, application security, IT security, learn about, because I had to, because I was the only, so I was hired as the principal security engineer at Tesla. I was the only security engineer there. I wanted to learn about investigations or get really good at investigations. I went to Apple. I worked for global security. I did very little IT security while I was at Apple. I was basically hunting employees that leaked information, or hunting vendors that leak information or chasing hackers around the world, right? That's and that made me really good at doing investigations. So my point is that where do you start? You can start pretty much almost anywhere, right? But you have to figure out what skill set you're missing. And for me, what I want, and also what you want to become. And for me, is I wanted to be a security generalist. And why security generalist is that a security generalist has a lot to offer. We security generalists have mastered many different domains in security, and which allows us to lead security teams, right? Because we are coming from from an empathetic point of view, because I've done that before, right? Like I don't ask my team to do things that I have never done before. Okay. Do I stay? So, that kind of answers the do I stay or do I move on question. So you have to determine when you have reached your peak in a job. And I tell my employees this all the time. Like, we are not here forever, right? We will move on to our next job. But while we're here, you need to learn as much as you can, grow as much as you can. And I will help you grow as much as you can so that you are ready for your next job. Okay. And so when you have reached a point where you learn as much as you can and you're not growing anymore, or you don't feel like you're growing anymore, it's time to move on. For me, as a manager, I support you moving on, right? I will help you move on. I will even help you find, there's been many times where I helped my employees find their next job. Okay. It's just, that's when you know when it's time to grow, right? Okay. And for me, it's, how do I define a successful career? It's really a career that you're happy with, right? Like, we're all going to be at different levels, but there's going to be a time in your career where you're going to be happy with what you're doing. I wouldn't say it might be forever, it might not be, but you will reach that point, and that's when you know you're successful, right? It's not what never compare yourself to your coworker, right? Oh, my coworker is making more than I am, right? That's your coworker is on a different path, different track from you. So never compare yourself to anyone else. Always focus on you and your own trajectory. Okay, and that's what to me will build a successful career. Okay. And back to the question as to, is there anything that I would have done differently? I think what I would have done differently is I wish I would have been a nicer person early on in my career. I think when I was, earlier on in my career, I was probably, Mark probably remembers better than I do. I was probably a hot-headed, like, thought I was like the best at what I did, right? And security professional, right? And so I think if I had understood what it meant to be empathetic from the start, that's my career would probably have grown faster. And I think that is what I would have done. If anything, I would have done differently is I probably would have just been a nicer person. I don't think I was a mean person, but I probably would have been an even nicer person. And right. And then there's the other part, like, when you're nice, not everyone's always nice to you, right? So just when that happens, when someone's not nice to you, right, don't interact as much with that person. Okay. Growing teams. Okay. Diversity and empathy. Okay, so I can say I build extremely diverse teams. Like this is something that I am extremely proud of myself, and like I purposely hire for diversity. Okay, and I say that you hire for diversity is because if you're not consciously hiring for diversity, you won't get diversity. You're going to hire people that act just like you or look just like you, right? And you don't want that, because Like what makes a strong team that grows, that works together, is a team that complements each other. And so diversity is complementary, right? So I think one of the most important factors of growing a strong team is a diverse team, right? People bring different skill sets, different experiences. Like I'm a big believer of that. If you look at my team right now, probably have the most diverse team in a very diverse company. Okay. And where I am working very hard on is, and consciously working hard on, is increasing gender diversity. And this is a big thing for us in our field, is that there's just not enough gender diversity. And the excuse has oftentimes been, well, there's just not enough security engineers out there, right? But I firmly believe if you go looking for that, you're looking for gender diversity, you will end up with gender diversity, okay, in your group. So that's so growing teams, for me, strong team is a diverse team. Okay. Recently, when I was interviewing someone, they asked me what, like, what's my vision, right? And I say, like, vision for me is about perhaps like vision for a product. If you ask me about what do I see from like a product perspective, the vision of the product, I can tell you, but what's the vision of the team? The vision of the team is, for me, is really about everyone having a good time, enjoying what we do in security, helping each other, right, in security. And so that's how I view, like, if you ask me about like a vision of like how a team should transpire. But visions for me is more for products, not necessarily for a team. A state and a goal for a team might be more, makes more sense. People make security work. Okay. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next slide. I'll just kind of jump over that for the sake of time. Story about retention and resilience. Okay, so I might just kind of, I'll talk a little bit. Don't want to share too many stories because we don't have a lot of time, because I already talked too much. So what I really want to drive about retention, and oftentimes I get asked by managers or professionals in security, like, how do you keep people? And I already alluded to this already. I don't keep people, right? I give people opportunities and I hope that they stay, right? My opinion of what a great opportunity is might not meet their expectations. And then if they leave, they go, they're growing. As long as they're growing, I feel good about that, right? But in order to have that come from that approach, you have to understand like resilience, right? And like, how do you ensure resilience? And how I ensure resilience is I build teams for resilience. Okay. I hire complementary skills. I also hire overlapping complementary skills, so that when someone departs, the team still has resilience, that there will someone that will be able to step in and keep things going, right? Maybe they're not the expert, but keep things going until we're able to hire someone else. When someone leaves the company, sometimes, like, I hear, sometimes when like someone leaves the company, you hear stories like, oh, when Joe left the company, we had to hire 2 people to replace them. Or Joe says, oh, when I left that company, they had to hire 2 people to replace me, right? Or it took me to leave before they hired 2 people when I was complaining that I was doing too much work, right? The truth is that in a company, there's always, like, people are always coming and going, but the company will keep moving forward, right? And so resilience will happen, right? So I don't try to worry too much about it. Okay. Education. So a couple of things. Where do I start? Right. Okay. say YouTube already. I know it sounds kind of funny, but YouTube certifications, training, books. We talked a little bit about that. But what's really important is if you're already in this field, be a mentor, right? Teach, give back. You'll learn from your mentee. Find a mentor. Like I've had people ask me randomly on LinkedIn, like, hey, can you help mentor me? Most of the time, like 99% of the time, I'm happy to jump on a Zoom and talk a little bit about your career. Unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth to talk about your career every week, but I do try to make the effort of, if you want to ping me on LinkedIn and jump on a Zoom and talk about more about what you learned here, or some of the points I talked about, more than happy to talk about it. Not purposely, I'm not able to always respond right away, but I will try to get, respond, and then get involved, right? That's the best way to continuously learn. Volunteer, go to DEF CON, volunteer at DEF CON, right? Volunteer at a security conference, great way to learn, okay? Selection technologies, I know this part put in here for the VARs and vendor resellers that are on this call. I'm sure some of you are probably on this call. And else, like how do I pick technology? Okay. Honestly, today I don't pick technology anymore. I get flooded with emails. Like half my emails are from vendors. I'm not able to read any of those emails anymore. My brain has just shut off, right? And so how do I pick technologies? When I will look at the subject lines of the emails that the vendors send, I will read maybe one or two sentences, okay? When I foresee a need, I will remember that there was an email from so-and-so vendor, then I will reach out. The unfortunate thing about this is that there's been so many times where I reach out, for some reason, the vendor is not interested in talking to me anymore, right? Which is kind of strange, but like that's kind of what happens, unfortunately. But it's usually based on a need. It's not based on an email that says API security is important today. You need an API security product. It's not. That's not what drives my selection of technology. What drives my selection of technology is the actual need that I have today, presently. Okay. And what technologies do I select are technologies that work in my environment. Product A that works really well in company A does not mean that product A works well in company B. Okay, product B might be horrible in company, A because the maturity of the security program is in a different place. So I pick products based on where the maturity is for a particular company I'm working at. Okay, and that's how I select products. I select products based on what my team is able to utilize. I've purchased lots of paperweights over the years, lots of expensive paperweights, and I'm ashamed every time I do so. So it took me a long time to learn, right, about product limitations, right, and what are the limitations of my team. Okay. What do you like most? Going back to the questions, what do you like most about being in cybersecurity? What I like is when I wake up in the morning, I never know clearly what I'm doing that day. Okay, every day is different. Okay, every day inside, it's a very exciting field. I'm very passionate about it. I love it because I get to talk to people. I get to be in front of all of you and share my experience. And then tomorrow morning when I wake up, right? Maybe a security researcher found, an external third-party security researcher found a problem in my environment, right? I'm as excited when there is a vulnerability discovered as I am when we fix the vulnerability. Okay, like it's like, because it's so interesting what people find, right? But companies frown on job hopping. I think when you work for a company, oftentimes we don't necessarily go work for the company. We go work for the manager. Okay, and so it really depends on your manager and it really depends on the company culture whether they'll frown upon it. Companies want to retain their employees for as long as they need that capability. Okay, that's how I look at it. Companies know that you will leave eventually. Okay, and so companies are prepared for that. Companies these days don't necessarily expect you to be there forever. Okay. My job while I'm at a company is to do my best to build a scalable team with scalable technology so that and also to build that team to the point where I can leave and that program will continue, right? I've done that many times. The programs I built are still there, right? And they are still growing and they are still scaling. So that's for me, that's my job. My job is not to make sure that I will have a job forever. My job is to hire and build a team so that for whatever reason, right, at some point in time, even, I will depart at some point in time, whether it's by choice or not by choice, or if like I win the lottery, perhaps, right, I might just leave. Okay, so that's how I look at it. I don't think companies frown on people job hopping. I think they are sad, and if you're in the middle of a project and you're a critical resource and you leave, right, then they'll be very unhappy with you. But there are times where, from my perspective, where you've outgrown the company or the role, and that the opportunities for you to go to the next level no longer exist, that it's time to move on, and managers understand. Okay, they understand. So I don't think companies necessarily frown on people job hopping because they hire people from other companies all the time. Okay. What do you like about working at Tinder? I actually really like working at Tinder, and I'm not just saying this because I work at Tinder today. I really like working at Tinder because Tinder's culture and philosophy really fits this concept of that around working in an empathetic environment. People are really nice at Tinder. The company, I actually can honestly say that the company actually do care about people. Like, if you're at Tinder and you don't see that, it's because you might not, like, you're not in those meetings. I'm in those meetings and I hear what the company discuss about, like, programs to help our employees, and the company genuinely cares, which I've been at a lot of companies where like they don't care. Okay, I work in a place where after I left, one of my employees was having issues at home, and he came to work one day a little bit off balance, said something wrong, and the company walked him out the door that day, right, without asking what's wrong, right? And so I've been at those companies before, and so I know that Tinder's not like that, and that's something to me that's very important, that to be in a company that actually cares about their employees. Okay. What do you think about? I don't know if did I mention that if someone can, the confidential computing question, I might need more clarification. I might be answering incorrectly, but if someone can clarify, that'd be great. In your opinion, what's traditional roles will be heavily influenced by security? I think every single role today, at some point in time, like security, I guess the dream is security becomes a commodity, right? And when you build products today, if your engineers don't understand concepts in security, your product has an actual real chance of failing. And that was not always the state. So I think, in my opinion, what traditional roles will be heavily influenced by security? I think engineering is already a field that's starting to be more heavily influenced by security. Okay. Then took the UCSC course in 2020. Now I work at Senior AppSec in an engineering company. How to build culture and process security within a company. Okay, so you have to bring the So this is like if a culture of security does not exist, right? And where you can't just go there and create a problem, meaning that you can't go to your boss and say, oh, we need to do security. What you need to do, what usually, there are two ways of a process security when there is no process. I'm sure there's probably some sort of process of security at your company. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an AppSec, right? But the employees need to learn why security is important. And this is a long, I could teach another course on this, right? Topic, because it's actually a very long-winded question. But like every employee has like a different concept of why or how security could be important to them. And you need to understand or try to understand what that angle might be. And so for engineering, oftentimes it's as easy as just, you're an AppSec showing them what that problem is. If I think you're in a course, I probably talked about this, where like sometimes building that, getting people to be on board with security is not just it's not a bottom down approach. It's oftentimes not just a bottom up approach either, but really a side to side approach, where you will have to convince one peer at a time until you reach some sort of threshold, and where that threshold where security becomes a culture. Luckily for us, more companies are more security conscious, so the company culture does change over time as new people are onboarded. Okay, so I don't know if that, you probably have to ask me on LinkedIn, because this, we're like almost out of time and I can talk for hours about this particular topic. And then the last one is, what do you think about the future of confidential computing? I don't know if I answer this. You might have to clarify that question. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for all your questions. I, apologize if I went off topic a little bit. Are there any other questions? Great. Then with that said, then Richard, Josh, I will hand it back to you.
Thanks, Abe. Really appreciate you sharing a lot of information and wisdom about how to get into this career, as well as actually how to treat our fellow cybersecurity professionals, especially in times of stressful situations. So really, thank you, Abe. Some final words for everyone there. If you don't know me, my name is Josh Chen. I'm the board member here at ISSA Los Angeles, serving as the technology director here. Want to actually encourage you, if you're on YouTube, please go ahead and click the raffle link that was just posted and go ahead and submit your name. We will draw a raffle really quickly shortly. So please throw your name in there and we will raffle off an Amazon gift card. I believe it's $25 as well. Last but not least, encouraging everyone to save the date as well. We are going to have our next meeting on March 16th, 2022. It's just got posted into the YouTube chat. I encourage you guys to register. We'll be having an evening meeting on there, sharing about, what is the topic that month? I forgot. But encouraging everyone to please.
Jeff Tutton and PCI and.
Thank you. Digital Forensic Services, PCI, incident response, I believe, is
incident response.
Yeah, so we all need incident response. Is the bane of all our existence. So please, by all means, sign up. We'd love to have you. It'll be the same time next month. With that, thank you everyone for attending, And just do a quick last call out for anyone else who wants to throw a name into the raffle. And if we'll draw the raffle shortly, and we will be sending you an Amazon gift card. With that, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. And we look forward to seeing you next month virtually. And we look forward to seeing you in April in person, live. And I hope everyone stays healthy, stay safe, test negative, and stay